The first thing that we're going to do to make our weekender bag is to prepare the lining. You will find in your kit the pattern piece to cut out for the base and the main bag panels. So one by one we're going to fuse each of our lining panels with our fusible fleece panels. That will give it a nice bit of body and make it nice and wodgy so that we can quilt it to give it that really luxurious interior to our bag. On the fusible fleece you have two sides. One side is fluffy and the other side is kind of rough and bobbly. Those rough bobbles are the glue, so you want those to be sort of facing the wrong side of the fabric. So what you're going to need to do is lay your fabric panel down in front of you. Give it a press to begin with, just to eliminate any creases. And if you've got any little bits of thread trapped or a bit of fluff, just make sure you get rid of that, because you don't want to fuse that into your piece. So I'm laying this down with the gluey rough side face down. So this is the wrong side of my fabric I'm looking at, and then my gluey side is face down, and I'm lining it up nice and neatly. And you can put a sheet on your ironing board to protect it if you wish. And I'm going to use a pressing cloth, otherwise known as an old tea towel. And then what I need to do is just, with a medium heat iron, so 2 dots, I'm just going to work my way along the panel. I'm going to hold my iron there for 15 seconds. Once I've done one panel, one area, I'll just move on to the next area, hold in place, count for 15 seconds. And it does take a little bit of time, and you have to be quite patient with this. It is a bit laborious. But you do want your fusible fleece to be nicely fused to your fabric. And once you feel that that's all done, then just check that it's nicely fused, that it's sticking together at all of the corners. Come off a bit there. Just press that down a little. And just make sure that the fleece has fused to your lining fabric across the base of your bag panel there. And you're going to repeat that same process for the larger back and front panels of your bag lining. And once we've done that, we're going to move on to quilting it. So our base, front and back panels have all been fused. We're now going to mark out our lines ready to quilt, and I do find it helps to draw those lines out first. Let's start with one of the larger panels. So I want to do a diamond quilting design, 10 by 10 centimetres. To get my first line, I'll just fold this at right angles to give me my first line. And I'm going to use a ruler to mark this out. And my heat erase pen. You can use chalk if you wish, and this will come out with heat. So once this gives me a guide to stitch on, and then once I iron it, it will disappear. So then what I can do is just use my ruler to mark out these quilted diamonds at 10 centimetre intervals. If you don't have a quilting ruler like this one, then you can just use a normal ruler and just make some marks to indicate 10 centimetres and then join them up. But having a quilting ruler does make this a bit quicker and easier. And you could do straight lines if you like, or you could do smaller diamonds. It's your bag, so you can design your quilting lines however you wish. I'm just going to do them like this. So those are all my lines going this way. And now I'm going to flip my ruler over and just use, line up my lines there. So I want to do my other lines at a 45-degree angle to get those diamond shapes. If you haven't got a quilting ruler, again, you can just fold this the other way to get your initial line, and then draw that line on, and then just space yourself out from that line by measuring and marking. And so there is that panel complete. I'm now going to mark out the same design on my other side panel and my base. So onto the sewing, and I've got the base panel here. I'm just going to follow the lines that I've drawn on, and I'm going to use a straight stitch. I'm going to use a stitch length of 3, and I'm using a universal size 80 needle. And I'll do a little back stitch at the beginning and end, and off I go. And I'm using a white thread, and if I feel as I'm sewing that my fabric is creeping along this way a bit, I just lift my presser foot, smooth everything back down and put it back down again, and I can do that every few stitches. Sometimes the fabric walks slightly away from the fleece if it's not quite fused. And I will just trim my thread tails as I go, because we're going to do quite a few lines of stitching here, and that will keep things neat and tidy. So it's good to have one of those have like a little pudding bowl by your side that you can pop your stitches, pop your bits of thread that you cut off into, because we're going to do quite a few rows of stitching here. And then once they're done, we can put that under the iron, and all of that blue ink will disappear. So I tend to do this in, I come up this one, and then I come back in the other direction for the next one, and back in the other direction. So if the fabric does start to move a bit, that sort of helps to cancel that out. If you've done a lot of quilting, you might have seen a technique where you just put a safety pin in the middle of each of these diamonds just to hold the fabric and the fleece together. You can do that as well if you want to, but because this has been fused on, it should be okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to stitch along each of those lines to create that quilted bottom panel, and then I'm going to do the same on the larger side, the larger front and back panels. There's that one all quilted. That's the bottom panel. If you're finding it hard to see where you have and haven't sewn, if you turn it over to the wrong side, that quilting becomes a lot more obvious, so you can just check that you have done all of those rows. And now on to the main panel, and if you're finding this is quite a big panel, so as you're sewing this, just make sure you've got plenty of space around you, and you're just going to, as you go through, you're just going to need to roll up your panel a little bit, and so that it folds into the nook of your machine nicely. Just make sure that you've got a nice bit of space for when you come to do this bit, because there is quite a lot of fabric here to contend with. Anyway, I'm going to carry on and just do exactly the same process of sewing along those lines as I did with the base of my bag. And those panels are now all quilted, and we are ready to start adding our pockets. First of all though, you can probably still see that blue pen there. You can just pass a warm iron over that, and that will disappear.